Right. So, Shirapan, I started sharing my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So, meanwhile, Bobby John, let's have a small recap of the exception handling that we had earlier. Okay.
Okay.
So, exceptions are of three types. Remember, right? Checked and unchecked exceptions. Checked are compile time, unchecked are during runtime. We will see them only at the runtime. Then to handle these exceptions or whatever these type of exceptions when we get, if we want to handle them, we can handle checked exception and unchecked exception, but not the errors. How do we handle these checked and unchecked exceptions? Using try catch block or using throws keyword. These are the only two ways to handle the exception. So this throws keyword we are going to see in today's session. Last time in last session we have seen only try catch block. Okay, so what is checked exception which is found during compilation, like any syntax error or any other obvious errors that your Java compiler will know before running it is called as checked exception. So it is found during compilation. For example, let me show you again. I'll just remove this. You see now, this is an error or warning, right? This is an error, which is a syntactical error, and you found this syntax error without running it. So this is compile time exception. Okay, then run unchecked exception or runtime exception. For suppose we have a mathematical, yeah, we have already seen the array index out of bounds exception, right? You are able to create the array with any values, but when you run this, you are getting the exception only at the runtime. You see here 0, 1, 2, 3. I have values only till third index, but I'm trying to print the fourth index value. So it will throw me an exception. But when I'm running this code, not directly when I just save it. When I run this code, I'll see it. So these kind of exceptions are called as runtime exceptions. And then error. Error is a human-made mistake. This might be caused due to various reasons like network issues, user input issues, developer mistakes, whatever. Human is a reason for this. Okay. And errors cannot be handled. There is no other way to handle the errors. We have to restart the application. That's all. And we have seen the hierarchy of the exception handling classes. So the parent class for all the exceptions is throwable. And then throwable is having divided into two subclasses called as error and exception. Again, error, we have few things. Error messages like out of memory, stack overflow error, all those kind of things. Exception is divided into checked and unchecked. And we have examples for checked and unchecked here. All right, these are all the examples for checked exceptions, and these are all the examples for unchecked exceptions. So that is what we have learned in our previous session, and we have seen the keywords called try, catch, and finally. Right? When we see that try, catch, and finally, we have discussed about these points: having try, catch, multiple try, catch blocks, having multiple catch blocks, and then having them in hierarchical order. Right? We have discussed all these catch blocks points in our previous session. And then we have also discussed how to print the values of how to print some message about the exception that occurred using three different methods: .toString, .getMessage, and print stack trace. .toString and .getMessage will return a string, so we have to print it in using SYSO statements. But print stack trace by default inbuilt, it has a print method, so you don't have to write it inside a SYSO statement. You can directly call from a class. Okay. Now let us see the next two topics called propagation, exception propagation, and exception delegation. Okay. Before going there, let us see some of the use cases or usage cases or conditions of this exception handling. We have covered most of them already. Individual try or catch or finally blocks cannot be written. That we have seen, right? If there is no catch block or finally block, try won't exist. You see, it will throw an error. Syntax error, finally, insert finally to complete the block statements. Okay. Similarly, catch or finally, individually they cannot go. Try should accompany with either catch or finally. Catch is not a mandatory block. Okay, try should accompany with either catch or finally. But catch and finally cannot go together. They should definitely have a try block. Okay. Right. Then, yeah, catch and final blocks cannot be used without try. For example, now let me remove this try block. You see, catch and finally both cannot exist without a try block. So try is mandatory to have a catch or finally block. And we already discussed about the execution flow, right? We have executed this and saw. When there is exception, normally when we execute this, it will execute the try block. If there is an exception, it goes into the catch block. After executing the catch block, it will execute the finally block. If there is no exception, it will execute the try block. Since there is no exception, it does not enter into any of the catch block, and then directly it jumps into finally block. So if there is exception, try, catch, and finally. If there is no exception, then directly try and finally. If there is no finally block, then try, catch. If there is no exception, only try, get out of the try catch block. Understood? Is that clear? Now, single try catch blocks can have multiple catch blocks, but only one finally block. That also we have discussed. In case of multiple catch blocks, each catch should be handled separate type of exception. That also we have seen. You see, exception, null pointer exception, and then index out of bounds exception. So if we are having multiple catch blocks, we should have, each catch block should have a different kind of exception. And also the generic exception should always be the last catch block, because index out of bounds, null pointer, and whatever, all the exceptions that we get from the applications are child classes of exception. If you keep this exception, generic exception, in the beginning, these two will become unreachable code. I think we have seen this in our previous session, but I'm showing you again. Just see it. You see, what is the exception you see? Unreachable catch block for index out of bounds exception. It is already handled by the catch block for exception. Understood? So whatever IOBE exception or null pointer exception, everything will be handled by exception. So there will be nothing that goes into the other catch blocks. So that is why it says null, what do you say? Yeah, it says unreachable catch block, unreachable code. Understood? So always the generic exception class or generic exception catch block should be the last one. Okay. All right. And in between try and catch blocks, this is simple things. You cannot write anything in between them. Like you cannot have a SISO statement in between them. Okay. Then catch blocks are executed only if the exception is raised, that we have discussed. And if the exception is raised in try block statement, the statements below the exception statement are not executed. That also we have seen. And then if the catch block is also raising exception, the program stops abruptly. We can't do anything, right? Try is raising an exception, and that exception should be handled by the catch block. But if the catch block is also raising some exception, we can't do anything. It will abruptly stop the exception. Sorry, it will abruptly stop the execution of the application. Okay. And then we can have a generic catch block to capture. That is done. Any type of exception, that is generic catch block. And then we can have multiple types of exceptions in a single catch block. This is one of the things that we missed. Right. Now here you see, I want to handle the index out of bounds exception or null pointer exception in a same way. whatever might be the exception, null pointer or IOB. So index out of bounds, that means I am getting a value from more than the index position. Okay, and null pointer exception, there is no array at all. So if I want to handle such kind of both exceptions at a time, then I can have OR condition here and then mention null pointer exception. That's all. And then there is no need for this. See here, you can have like this. If you want to handle multiple exceptions, like suppose I just want to print this message, then why do I need to have multiple catch blocks? I can handle both of the errors in a single catch block. Understood? So this block will be executed if I get index out of bounds exception or null pointer exception, any of these things. For both the exceptions, it will execute this particular catch block. This is particularly written because if your Java version is greater than 1.7, then only this mixing or merging of two or more exceptions into a single catch block can happen. Before version Java 7, you won't be able to do that. You need to have individual catch blocks separately. But after Java version 7, you can merge these catch blocks. Okay. All right. And then now is exception propagation. This is one of the interesting topic you have to understand, and this will help you when you're writing some code and then you have some exceptions. If you want to debug, this will help you. Okay, where is the exception actually? Where should I fix? If you want to know, this exception propagation will help you in the stack trace. Okay. All right. So what is exception propagation? Suppose if exception is raised and then it is being called by some other methods. For example, I am calling a method inside a method, and that method is calling another method, and there is an exception in the basic method. Now, the basic method doesn't throw the exception directly. It will assume that we are handling it in other methods. So that is why when we have this exception and when we run this program in the console, it will give me the clear information from where it actually started and to which class or to which page it went or to which class it went. And then finally, it will reach to the main method. And even if the main method doesn't handle the exception, it will throw the exception. Okay, that is nothing but exception propagation. So let me show you this example of exception propagation. Okay. Now, I'll create a separate class here, Selenium. I need a main method. All right. So here I'm going to write some code. Okay. Where say I'll create a method. Public static void m1. Okay, some method I'm creating, method 1. Okay, where I'm going to call add method. Okay, so I'm going to create that add method. Public static void add. Okay, but to add, I'll call some method which is accepting two parameters, 10, 20. Okay, so I'm going to create another. No. Instead of add, I'll use divide. Okay. Division. Public static void division it will take two numbers, integer, comma, integer b. Okay. Now here, you know how do we divide, right? Integer c is equals to a divided by b. You understood? There is I'll say mathematical operation. Mathematical operation. Okay, so there is a method called mathematical operation, which in turn inside it is calling the divide method. In the divide method, we are passing the values, and then this divide method is calling division method, where we are having two parameters, 10 and 0. And in the division method, we are performing the division operation. And then let's print out this C value. Result of division is C. Oh, sorry. Plus C. So this is our method. Now we are going to call the mathematical operation method in our main method, right? Mathematical operation. Now let us run this. Can you divide any number by 0? No, right? We cannot divide any number by 0. It will throw an exception, division by 0 exception. We cannot divide numbers with 0. Okay? So that is the exception I am trying to show you here for propagation. So actual exception will be raised at this line, because you won't be able to divide these numbers by 0. But the exception will move from this method to this method. And here also we are not having any exception handling. So it will move from this method to this method. And here also we do not have the exception handling technique. Then it will move to the main method, because this method is being called from main method, right? So it will move to the main method, and here it will see if there is any exception handling. Here also we do not have exception handling. So here it will throw the exception. So that means what happened? Actually, the exception is raised at line 14, but it didn't throw the exception directly. From line 14, it went into line 10 and checked whether there is an exception handling. No, it is not there. So line 10 again raised an exception, so it went into line 6. Line 6 again raised an exception, and there is no exception handling, so it moved to the method where this method is being called. So the method is main method. So here also it moved to line number 20, and then at line 20 it will check whether there is an exception handling. There is no exception handling. So what it will do is it will throw an exception from line 20. So that is nothing but exception propagation. Automatically the exception information will be passed on to the calling methods. We don't have to do anything. I did not write anything new, or I did not use any new keywords here. I just created some methods and called methods inside those methods. Right? Now let me run this and show you the sample. You see here, exception propagation, where it started, line number 14. There is no exception handling here, so it went into the divide method. Right? You see here. Okay. So first is division, which is at line number 14. At this place, the exception is raised at this place, but it is unable to divide it, and there is no exception handling, so it went into the method where this division is called. Where are we calling this division method? Inside divide method. You see this divide? Line number 10. So the exception is raised at this division. And then here also we do not have any exception handling. So it is checking for where did we call this divide method. Divide method is called inside mathematical operation. So it went into mathematical operation and it verified. There also we did not handle the exceptions. So it went into the main method and then it threw the exception. What is the exception? Arithmetic exception, division by 0. You cannot divide the elements by 0. So this is called as exception propagation. Exception propagation is done implicitly. You don't have to do anything excess or extra to move the exception to its calling methods. It will be done automatically. All right. Any questions in exception propagation? No? Fine. So for suppose now we have the exception created here, and then we are not handling the exception here, or we do not have the try catch blocks here. So it moved into the divide. So here also we do not have the try catch blocks, but let us write a try catch block here. Arithmetic exception AE. We'll say CISO A dot get message. Okay, you see now, so the exception is being raised at this line. It is not handled here, so it will automatically propagate to this method. Here also we are not handling, then it will automatically propagate to the divide. Where are we calling this divide method? So it is under mathematical operation. So it will come here, and then here we are having a try catch block. So this try catch block will help us handle the exception, and it will not throw the exception. Okay, let me show you. I'll write a CISO statement after performing the operations. This is and okay. Now let me run this and see. You don't see the exception, but it will give the information of the exception. You see, after performing the operation, this is end. Okay, and then what is the exception? Division by 0. Do you see any exception? Did it abruptly end, or did it complete till the execution? Right. This executed the mathematical operation method, and then also this one. That means the execution is completed. This is the last line of the main method. Right. So it did not stop abruptly because we have handled the exception in the mathematical operation method. So whenever there is exception propagation, if you handle the exception in one of the method, in one of the calling methods, then the exception won't propagate further. It will be handled there itself. Clear? All right. Now, unchecked exceptions. These are the runtime exceptions. So these propagate automatically, and we do not have to use any new keyword. Whereas checked exceptions, if you want to propagate, I mean, if you want to do, if you want to transfer the exception from one method to the other method by your own, if you want to move it, okay, then you will use this throws keyword. The other keyword which is in the exception handling. Try catch finally we have seen. Now we have throws and throw keyword. So now we are discussing about throws keyword. That is the other way of handling the exception, you see, using throws keyword. One is try catch block and the other one is throws keyword. See, again, we need to handle these. Even if you delegate the exception, then you need to use a try catch block at some point to handle the exception. Otherwise it will throw the exception. But if you just want to delegate the exception, then you just use the throws keyword. If there is no exception, you won't face any problem. But if there is any exception, then it stops the program abruptly. Okay. So exception propagation is done. Let us see. We will see about the exception delegation, or propagation or delegation, both are same. The delegation, we do it intentionally. Okay. And we'll see a little later this. Okay. Here we have exception delegation. I'll come to that at this point. Then you can have a number of try catch blocks inside a class. Yes, that we all know. We can write any number of try catch blocks inside a class. And this is one of the famous interview question. They will ask you, see, the execution flow of try catch blocks is whether the catch is executed or not, finally will be definitely executed. Try will be executed mandatorily and finally will be executed mandatorily, right? Catch will be executed only if there is an exception. So in interviews, they'll ask, I want to skip executing finally. What should I do? Finally, by default, finally is the mandatory block that will get executed. Where is our exception? Yeah, here it is. So finally block is a mandatory block. Whatever you do in the try or catch, at the end, this finally block will be definitely executed. You cannot stop finally from executing if it is present. So interviewers will ask, how do I skip finally method? I don't, how do I skip finally block? It's not a method. How do I skip finally block? By default behavior of Java, you cannot skip the finally. It will definitely execute if you have it here. So you are going to execute a try. If it is exception, then it will go to the catch block and then finally. If there is no exception, it will execute the try block and then finally block. So there is no situation where finally is not executed. So that is where the interviewer will check your knowledge. So if you don't want to execute the finally block, we can do it only in two cases. One, using the statement called system.exit of 0. Do not use this because this will log off your system. It will get out of your system. Okay. Second one. And the first one is we will add a conditional statement and we'll make sure that the code is not entering into the block, try block itself. So if the try block is not executed, then finally block will not be executed. So these are the only two ways that we can skip the execution of finally block. Okay, is that clear? Yanji, Sharap and Bobby, is that clear? If it is clear, then I'll move to exception delegation and user defined exceptions. Then we can move to other topic. Okay, super, Sharap. Thank you. All right. So we have already seen the ways to get the information about the exception, that is using toString method, using get message, and then using print stack list. If you want to know the information about exception, then you can use these three of the methods. Only three. All right. Now let us see exception delegation. Okay. So what I'm going to do. All right, I'll create a new class. Method. All right, so here, so actually I'm writing this method in the same class, but you can have the methods in other classes as well. Okay, just for easy understanding, I'm writing the methods in the same class. Okay, so public static void open page. For example, let us assume that I'm opening a particular page here. I'm not using the WebDriver code, but I'm just saying, let us assume that I'm opening the WebDriver page. See, so there is login page. Okay, for example, I'm writing CISO statements instead of the Selenium code. Click on login. Okay, now once we click on login, to see the home page, we need to wait for some time. All right, so I'll add thread.sleep. How much time? We should not use this thread.sleep. We already learned the exception. Already learned the synchronization methods, right? WebDriver wait and Fluent wait, you can use them. But to show the exception, I am using this. So thread.sleep method is a method which is written in Java, which will throw exception for us. Okay. So you have to handle this exception either here, or if you don't want to handle it, you know that this is going to raise an exception. You don't want to handle that exception here, and you want to delegate it to some other method. Then you see the suggestion, add throws declaration. Right? We know that this method is definitely giving the exception. So what we are going to do is, we are not handling it, but we are throwing this interrupted exception. And okay, let me say CISO user is on home page, for example. Okay, now I'll have another method, public static void run scenario. Okay, I'm running the scenario, and this run scenario, which scenario? Open page. So I'll just call this open page method inside this. Okay, now you see here, I'm just calling the method. This is also a static method, this is also a static method, and both are in the same class. And open page is not accepting any parameters. Here also I'm not passing any parameters. But if you see exception propagation, I called the same way. See, divide method from the same class. It is not throwing any error. And in divide, I'm calling the division method with parameters. It is not throwing any error. But you see here in delegation, I'm just calling this open page method in run scenario method. It is throwing me error. Why? Because this open page method is throwing an exception. That means it is delegating an exception, this exception. So what does this mean? So open page knows that this is the cause of the exception, but I'm not handling it. Please handle it on your own. So that is why we added this throws interrupted exception. So whoever is calling this open page method need to handle this exception. What is the exception? Interrupted exception. Or if they don't want to handle here, they can again use throws keyword. Throws interrupted exception. Now you see the error is gone. Right? Now if I call this run scenario from the main method, you see here, if I call it from the main method, here it will throw the exception again. You see, either I have to delegate it or I have to handle it. So this time I don't want to delegate it, I'll handle it. Try and then catch. What is the exception? Or you can use a generic exception as well, interrupted exception IE. I'll say CISO IE dot get message. That's all. So this is nothing but exception delegation. If you don't want to handle the exception and you want to share it, or if you want to ask the others who is calling this method to handle your exception, then we use this throws keyword. Okay, so throws keyword, what it does, it knows the source of the exception, but it is not going to handle. I'm not going to handle because there might be, if there is an exception, the way I handle the exception might be different, and the way you handle the exception might be different. Right? For all the applications, if there is a delay, we will not just close the application, right? Sometimes some of the applications will close and reopen. Some of the applications we keep on waiting. Some of the applications will click on some of the buttons again. Right? So there will be different scenarios to handle such kind of exceptions or such flows. So that is why Java is providing us this exception delegation concept, where you can use this throws keyword and delegate the exception to the calling methods. So now the exception actually will be raised from this line, if at all. Okay, but if we are not handling it here, we are letting the other methods know that, okay, I'm going to this open page is declaring, or open page is letting the world know that I am going to raise some exception. You have to handle it. So whoever is calling this open page should handle this exception, or If they don't want, or if that particular method doesn't have the handling mechanism, then you can delegate it again. Okay, and then at a particular point, if you even if you don't want to handle the exception here, you don't want to have the try catch blocks here, also you can delegate it. But if there is an exception, because of this, it will throw the error and the execution will be stopped abruptly. But if you have try catch block, it won't stop abruptly. That's all. That is the only thing. Now let me run this and show it to you. User is on home page, and then that's all. Execution is completed. There is no exception, so you don't see any exceptional information. Understood? All right. So this is exception propagation and exception delegation. So we have seen try, catch, finally, throws. Now, if you want to what do we say, declare, or if you want to create your own exception message or your own exception custom exception, then we can do that with the help of this throw keyword. For example, I want to create a new method, public static void cleanup, something. I'm calling some method, and then I want to create my own exception. Something happened, and then I want to send an exception. So I'll use this throw keyword and then use throw new exception. Throw new exception with this string message. What is the message? Exception occurred. User defined exception. What is this exception? Cleanup didn't happen successfully. Please do it manually. So this is the exception message. Okay. I want to throw a new exception which I created. Okay. So when I am throwing this, wherever, whatever the method which is calling this should know that this is throwing an exception, right? So cleanup method, I'll call it here after the try catch block so that you will see the information. I don't want to handle it. I want to print the message. Cleanup. So this is also throwing, because we told we are throwing the exception, and this cleanup here we are calling it in the main method, right? So this is also here also we don't want to handle it using the try catch block. So I'm using this throws exception. Now when I run it, it will automatically throw the exception. Let's see that. You see, if I don't handle it, I just delegated, but there is no one who is calling the main method. So that is why it stopped at the execution. And what is the exception message you see here? What is the exception? Java language.exception, exception occurred. So you see this? This is the message what I gave here, right? User defined exception, cleanup didn't happen successfully. Please do it manually. If you want to create your own exception messages, custom exceptions, your application might need some different exception messages. So in those cases, if you want to create user defined exceptions, then use throw keyword. Throw keyword will create an exception. It will create an exception. Yep. So that's all. This is all about exception handling. Exception handling, exception propagation, and exception delegation. Any questions on this? You understood exception handling? This is the final topic of Selenium or Java. Okay, fine. So now let us move into the other topic, TestNG. So today we'll see the introduction to TestNG and setup of TestNG on our Eclipse. Okay, and then later in tomorrow's session, we will see the usage of TestNG. Okay. All right. TestNG, enter. All right. So why do we need TestNG? What is the purpose of TestNG? So actually, so whenever we wrote some programs, for example, we wrote some Selenium methods like adding a user, all those things, right? Where is this working with dropdowns? Okay. Yeah. So here, for example, I'm taking this class, okay, working with dropdowns. You see here, I opened the browser and then I logged into the application. But did I verify that the user is logged in or not? Or did I assign a pass or fail status to this steps? No, there is no pass or fail status. If there is an exception, it is throwing an exception. Otherwise, it is not doing it. It is not showing us anything on the console, right? And then again, I'm clicking on the PIM link, right? And then once I go to the PIM page, I am selecting different values in the dropdown. But am I checking whether the intended value, full-time contract, is selected or not? I'm saying select this value, but did I verify that this value is selected or not? Or did I assign any status if for example, I tried to select full-time contract, but it is still having freelance. So it has to stop the execution, right? It has to give me the status, whether it is successfully selected the full-time contract or not. Similarly, I want to select internship here using the value 6, but it is selecting something else. So I have to compare whether this value is associated with this PT part-time internship or not, right? I did not do, I did not, I'm not assigning any status. Even here for freelance, I'm using the method called select by visible text of freelance, but I'm not verifying whether it is selected or not. Right? Even after I'm verifying, I have to assign a status true. Either the step is pass or fail. You'll do it right on ETL testing. You'll write your steps, and then if all the columns, all the data types, or all the rows are matching, then you'll mark the test case as pass. Otherwise, you'll mark that scenario as fail, right? So similarly, here also, I'm doing some operations and I have to verify it, whether the user is successfully logged in or not. If the user is logged in, then I have to mark this step as pass. Otherwise, I have to mark this step as fail. But Selenium WebDriver does not have any such methods or any such options to assign a status to the step or the class. That is the reason we are depending on TestNG. Understood the purpose of TestNG? Bobby, Sharap, NG. Fine. All right. So TestNG is an open source reporting framework. That open source means it is also available for free. You can add it to your project and you can use the TestNG library easily for free. Okay. And then what is this TestNG? NG stands for next generation. Okay. Why it is called as next generation? Then what is the old tools that we have? Generally, before TestNG, we have JUnit, NUnit, and then some other unit testing frameworks. TestNG is also designed for unit testing. But since we are writing code and then we are, TestNG is having more functionalities than to perform on unit testing. So we are using the same TestNG library for performing our functional testing as well. Okay, where it is all these JUnit, NUnit, and TestNG are the unit testing frameworks which we are using for the script automation. So what is unit testing? When the developers write code, they want to verify the block they have written is successfully passing or not, right? So to verify from the development side, they will write unit tests, automated unit tests. The same unit testing, I mean, they are verifying their own particular blocks, but here we are verifying the complete application. So it's more or less the same activity that we are doing, same as developers. They are writing the application code, we are writing the application automation code. Both of the teams are writing same Java, same code or handling the same application, right? So to verify whether their code is working perfectly or not, they use unit testing. And to verify whether the application we are working on is working up as per the requirements, we do functional testing. And so on functional testing, if we are automating the regression or smoke scenarios, and then whenever we want to assign a state, we would like to know how many test cases passed and how many test cases failed. We don't want to stop abruptly when an exception is occurred. So that is why we learned exception handling, and then now we are also having some reporting framework which will help us assign status, that is pass or fail status to the methods. Okay, so that is why TestNG is in picture now. Okay, and these are all the features available in TestNG. What we can do with the help of TestNG, you can create test cases that will have status. Earlier when we run, did we see any status like pass or fail? Is it saying that this test case is failed or this method is failed? No, it just threw the exception, that's all. All right, it just throws the exception, but it will never say whether the status is pass or fail. Here I have completed, I did 3 steps: login page, credentials page, and home page. But did it say that this step is pass, this step is fail, this step is pass? No, it is not assigning any status to the steps. It is just simply throwing me the exception, right? If you want to know how many steps passed and how many steps failed, you need to assign status to these steps. To assign those status, we have TestNG. You can assign either pass or fail status to your methods. Okay, and then TestNG also supports us pre and post conditions for the test. Like if you want to do something, for example, if I want to add employee, or if I want to transfer funds, for example, if I want to transfer funds, I need to have a bank account, and in the bank account I need to have a beneficiary registered, right? That is a prerequisite for me to transfer the funds. Agree? Please be interactive. I'm not asking you any questions on Java or Selenium. I'm asking some general things, right? So those are the preconditions. And once I transfer the funds, for suppose Sharab is transferring me the funds. So once she did the transfer, she'll check with me, right, whether I received the amount or not. That is my post condition. User should be receiving the funds. So you can also, TestNG also provides us some methods which gives pre and post conditions. So before executing all the methods, you can use these preconditions, where setting up of the bank account, setting up the beneficiary in your bank account, all such kind of things you can do in precondition. What is the actual test? Transferring funds. That will be in your test case. And post condition, once you transfer the funds, the post condition is you will verify with the receiver account whether the amount is added to the receiver account or not. So if you have any such pre and post conditions, you can apply using TestNG. Okay, or forget about this bank statement. Even if the orange HRM, I want to add an employee. So if I want to add an employee, I should be logged into the portal. So user should have access to the portal. That is my precondition. Right? After adding the employee, I have to clean it up. I don't want to store, or I don't want to have the dummy employee inside my system. I want to delete it so that nobody gets disturbed. That is my post condition. Once I add it and the test is pass or fail, I'll take the screenshots and then I'll close the execution. But while closing, I'll delete whatever I added. Right? So that is pre and post conditions. And till now, we have created these many classes. Whenever we want to run, we are running only a single class. But I want to run all the classes. Is it possible with plain Java or plain Selenium? No. When we are doing regression, that is completely automation. You don't have to do it manually. To reduce the manual efforts itself, we are going for automation. But now I have a number of classes in all these packages, you see, and if I want to execute all of them one by one, I have to sit in front of the system and I have to execute them one by one. Is it okay? And while it is running now, here it is taking 10 to 15 seconds because this is a small script. But if we have large number of scripts and each script is taking around 10 to 20 minutes. So for example, I have to run this script and it is taking 20 minutes. So I'll run and I'll sit idle for 20 minutes. Then what is the use? We are moving to automation because we want to use the resource. We don't want to waste our manual resource. Manual efforts should be done, or we should use the resource for other purposes. But again, even after automation, you are asking the resource to sit in front of the system and run one by one. The resource is sitting idle for 20 minutes to complete the execution for each test case. You see, there is no purpose of having automation there. So that is why, and even a direct WebDriver or Selenium doesn't provide such kind of methods or options for us to run all the classes at once. But TestNG helps us to do these batch executions. You don't have to run them one by one. You can run all of them at once. We have to make some changes, but I'm just explaining the problems and I'm giving introduction to this TestNG so that while we are working on this TestNG, it will make easy for you to understand why we are doing this. Okay. And then we can pass the parameters via TestNG XML file. This you will understand when I show you it. Why do we need to pass it from the XML file? Why do we need to pass the parameters from the external files? Okay. And we can also perform the parallel execution, but this TestNG parallel execution is not so smooth. It will cause some errors because you will be executing them on the same system. So that is why, though it supports, we have to handle it in multiple threads. We won't do it. Okay. And then data driving. If you are working on a data driven framework and then you want to pass multiple data to perform on the scenario, then this data, there is a method or annotation called a data provider, which helps us perform the data driving concept. Okay, that is also, this data provider is also a method which is, or annotation which is present or given by TestNG. We do not have it in the WebDriver. Okay, and then you can create verifications. Like I said, you can verify something and you can assign a status, either pass or fail. And then you can create reports, HTML report and emailable report. Both those are the both reports that we get generally out of the TestNG. Okay, I'll show you that. How do we see the how do we get the TestNG report and what is the emailable report? Where do we find it? All those things we'll see once we start the usage of TestNG. And after all these benefits, user might not be satisfied and then he want to customize the way the TestNG behaves. Then that feature is also given by TestNG, and that feature is called as, or that concept is called as listeners concept. So TestNG provides us listeners. That means interfaces. Listeners are nothing but interfaces. So you can, if you don't want to have the default behavior of the TestNG, you want to change something, then you can use these listeners and modify the behavior or override, or create a same method and override the existing method and write your own code so that the existing behavior will be overridden and your behavior will be applicable. Understood? So these are all the features which are available in TestNG. We will see all these features one by one. Okay. Right. Now let us see how do we configure TestNG. First, we have to install TestNG in Eclipse. Since this is an old Eclipse and I already have TestNG, but I'll show you how do we install TestNG in Eclipse. So go to help, go to Eclipse Marketplace. You know this, right? Help and Eclipse Marketplace. Once you go here, search for TestNG. This is loading. Once the marketplace is loaded, you will see all the softwares which you can install in your Eclipse. You can just search for TestNG. You will see an application. You see this TestNG for Eclipse. Since this is already installed in my machine, if it is not installed, you will see a button like this, install. So you just click on that install. So TestNG support for Eclipse will be installed. Understood? This is one way of so this is one way of adding TestNG to your Eclipse. If this is if here when you click on install, if this is not getting installed, or if you are having some issues to install, you are holding the if you are using the older version of Eclipse, then it asks us to drag and drop. If you are having such kind of problems, then you can do another way. Just go to this help, go to install new software. This is the install new software. Just click on it, and then here you'll have yeah, this is the URL. Okay, you can find this URL on TestNG site. Go to testng.org. testng.org. This is a site for TestNG. Every information about TestNG will be present here. Now you want to download this TestNG, right? So just go to download. You will see the URL here, DL binary URL. You see this? Here are the instructions. Select help or install new software and enter the update site URL work with field. So this is the URL now. They have changed it. Earlier it used to be the one which I selected, but now they have changed it to this. You can take this, paste it here, and click on add. You can give any name, TestNG update site, something, any name. It's up to you. How do you want to identify this? Okay, I give this add. Now when I added, you see there are some libraries being displayed here. Select this TestNG, click on next. This will install this particular version of TestNG in your machine. That's all. Wait until you see the finish button. Click on the finish button once it is installed. If it is asking any, what do we say, concern or accept terms and conditions, you just accept it and then click on proceed further until you see the finish button is enabled, and click on finish button. So TestNG will be installed in your Eclipse. So how do you verify whether TestNG is installed in your Eclipse or not? Okay, to verify that, you go to this file, go to file, go to new, click on other. You see here TestNG. If it is not installed, you won't see the TestNG option here. If TestNG is installed, then you will see this TestNG folder here and then TestNG class option. Okay, or on the project also you can right click and go to new and then click other. You will see TestNG here as well. TestNG and TestNG class. Right click on the project, new, other. Inside the other, you will see all the options where you have TestNG and TestNG class. If you see this, TestNG is successfully installed on your Eclipse. If you don't see this, TestNG is not installed on your Eclipse. Okay, is that clear? Fine. So here is the information. Okay, now the URL is updated. Earlier this was the URL, but now they have changed the URL, so I'll also update the URL here. Okay, so these are the steps to install TestNG in Eclipse. New way, old way, you can go to Eclipse Marketplace and then just click on install. Okay, all right. Now we have installed TestNG in our Eclipse, but our project doesn't have the TestNG libraries, right? You still see Java libraries and some other reference libraries like SQLEX and other things, whatever we added, right? Now I want to add TestNG also. Do you see the TestNG is associated with this project? No, it is not associated. To associate TestNG with this project, right click, go to build path, configure build path, and then select class path. Okay, and then add library. Click on add library, and you see this TestNG library. If you install TestNG, then only you will see this TestNG. Otherwise, you won't see it. Select this TestNG. Click on next. Click on finish. Now you see TestNG is added. Click on apply and close. You see TestNG is associated with our project now. Now the TestNG libraries are available for us. So since the TestNG, once the TestNG is available for us, you can use the methods inside this TestNG packages in our classes and write the code. Understood? Once we added Selenium library, then only we'll be able to see this driver, find element, by all these methods. Similarly, for TestNG, once we add these libraries, then only we'll be able to see the methods or annotations related to the TestNG. So this is a dependency for TestNG usage. Without this library, you cannot run TestNG code. Okay. All right. So this is all about setting up of the TestNG. Understood the basics or introduction of TestNG? Any questions in this? Okay, sure. So the next topic will be annotations. Right. So for all the TestNG information, you can go to this documentation which I have just shown you. Here is the complete information. Whatever you want to know about TestNG, everything will be present here. So this is a welcome screen, and if you want to download, you can click on download, and then if you want to see the complete documentation, just click on the documentation. It will give the table of contents. What is TestNG? What are the annotations? What you will do? What all we can do? How do we create groups? How do we create parallel sets or parallel runs? How do we create reports? How do we modify the behavior of TestNG using listeners? Okay, so you have all the things, whatever you can, whatever you want to use or whatever you want to perform, you have everything here. Okay, you can go through this documentation, which helps you understand more about TestNG, right? It will give clear information about running, how do we run TestNG, and then what are the parameters or what are the options that we have in command line. Generally, we don't use the command line execution. We use Eclipse or any IDE. So don't worry about this command line. Okay, and then what are the test methods, what are test classes, and what are test groups? How do we create them? What is an XML file? See, this is a TestNG class. This is a TestNG XML file. So what is XML? What is the meaning of test group, run and include, all these things you will see here. Okay, we are also going to see these things in our sessions now. Okay, let us go one by one. I have my own notes, so I'll follow the notes and almost try to cover all the things which is present in the documentation, whatever is needed for us. All right. So the main important point, the most important point is this: TestNG classes doesn't have main method. If it doesn't have main method, see, whatever we will write, if you want to execute something, then it should be inside a main method. right? But what I am saying is testng doesn't have a main method. Then from where it will start execution? How does the compiler know that it should execute this? It shouldn't execute this. How does the compiler know that this is a method it has to execute? It will know with the help of annotations. We are not going to have a main method because the implementation of main method is internally done by testng. So in your testng classes, you don't see any main method. You will see methods with associated annotations. Okay. So why do we need these annotations, or what are the types of annotations that testng provides? We use these annotations to specify what type of method it is, or what type of method we are writing. Okay. So why? I mean, if you say what type, that means do we have multiple annotations? Yes, we have multiple annotations. We have multiple types of annotations. What are the different types or multiple types of annotations? Test methods, precondition methods, and post-condition methods. Okay. So in testng classes, each method will be associated with the annotation. Of course, you can also have methods without annotations, but those methods without annotations will never get executed until unless you call them from any other methods which is having annotation. Okay. So if you want to execute something with testng, then they should be associated with any annotation. If there are no annotations, then that class won't get executed, or that methods won't get executed. Okay. So the execution flow in normal Selenium or WebDriver classes, we know, right? Whenever there is a main method, the execution starts from main method line 1 till the end of the main method. If you have any method calling or object creation of these classes, it will go into that class, but after this line, this is completed, then it will start executing from this line itself. So top-down approach, right? It will start from the main method and it will go line by line. But in testng, we are not having the main method and we are not having the line by line execution. We are having some annotations. We are having some dependency on the annotations. All right. So what type of annotations? What is the execution flow of these annotations? The execution flow of these, we have multiple different kinds of annotations. We'll see those annotations in a bit. Just give me some time. But let us understand the flow of these annotations. So first, it will execute the precondition, then the test case methods, and then the post condition. Like prerequisites, the prerequisite setup will be done. Once the prerequisite is done, then we will execute the test cases. And then after the execution of test cases, if you have any post conditions like logging out the application or closing the browser or logging off the system, whatever, if you have some post conditions, those post conditions can also be done with the help of this test stage. Okay. So what are the different types of methods? We have these types of methods, like the test case methods where the actual test case or actual scenario is being tested, and a precondition method where the prerequisites are being set up, and then post condition methods where the cleanup activities or the actions after the operation is performed should be done. Such kind of actions will be done here. Okay. All right. So what are the available? This is the execution flow: precondition, test case, and post condition. So with this, we'll understood that there are three different types of methods, that is precondition methods, post condition methods, and test case methods. All right. So what are the precondition methods? What are the post condition methods? How do you identify a test method? Now we have a hierarchy. Testng follows XML file. So if you want to run any class, or if you want to run any script, then we use the testng XML file. But we can also run without the testng XML file. But if you have a testng XML file, we are running from the testng XML file. So the precondition and post condition methods or the other things depends on the XML sort. For example, here, okay, let me go to this testng example for sample. You see here, this kind of XML files we are going to have in our project, and then we are going to mention all the information here. Now, this XML has a hierarchical order. Suit should be present, like our HTML. HTML is the top element, right? In a similar way, for this testng XML, suit is the top element. Inside the suit, you'll have you can have multiple tests, one test, two tests, and inside the test you have classes, and inside the classes you have all the classes that you want to execute. Okay, and then inside each class you'll have the methods, right? So you have suit, test, class, and then methods. Methods can't be declared here, or methods can't be shown here, so you can just assume inside the class there are methods. Okay, so this is the hierarchy: suit, test, class, and methods. Okay, now the same hierarchy: suit, test, class, and inside the class you have methods, and these methods we have test script. If you want to mention the test script, you have @test annotation. So this is the hierarchical order of the execution. Okay, now if you want to do something before the suit execution starts, then you have a method called before suit. What is classes? Yanji, you see here, these are all the classes we have created in Java, right?
No. Nikhil, I'm asking about in XML file there is class and class.
I'll tell you, you'll understand it. So this is the hierarchy. Like you remember this point? Okay, introduction. Let me open the introduction sheet. Then you see this batch execution of test. We discussed about this, right? If you want to execute all the test cases at once, I don't want to sit and run each test case one by one. You remember this?
Yeah.
Right. So now to perform this operation, our test.ng XML file will help us. So you see here, this is one test regression. So if I want to do my regression testing, then I have to run all the test cases inside all the classes which I mentioned here. So this is a class name that is here, test.sample.parameter sample. That means in our case, it will be com.pom.pagelocators.c1. For example, I'm saying, understood? So here I want to execute all these classes. So if I want to execute all these classes, then I'll mention all these class names inside the test.ng XML file here. So when I run this XML file, it will automatically execute all these classes. Understood?
Yeah, so we have to mention classes, right?
Yeah, for now, let's assume that it's only classes, but we also have some other things called as groups, include, exclude methods. All those things are there. We'll learn a little slower. Okay, since it's the day one of test.ng, let us assume that whatever you want to execute, which class you want to execute, you just mention those classes here. That's all. So this is nothing but your class name, a package name with a class name. Okay, so understood what is classes, right?
Yes, Nikhil.
So this supports the batch execution for us. All right. Now let's go back and let's see. I think we have enough of theoretical part now. Let us see the execution now. Let us understand the annotations. What are the annotations? How do we? How does the test.ng recognize the methods? Okay, let us see them. So we have. Okay. Now you have seen the test.ng XML file. You understood the hierarchy. There is a suit, and inside the suit we have test, right? Suit, yeah, test, and then inside this test you have classes, and then inside the class we have methods. Okay, so if you want to do something before executing or before starting the suit, then you have annotation called @before suit. This is a precondition. Before starting the suit, it will execute this method. Okay, and then before executing the test of the test.ng XML tag, it will have this before test, before suit, before test. And if you want to execute something before a class, then you have annotation called before class. And if you want to execute before each method, then you have before method. So these are all the precondition methods. Okay. Similarly, we have post conditions. After the suit execution is completed, you want to execute something, then you will have after suit. Similarly, after test, and similarly after class, and similarly after method. So these are the 8 annotations that are available for pre and post conditions. And then if you want to mention an execution, or if you want to mention a test case, then you have to use this test case. So this is the actual method. Okay. So these are the 9 annotations that we generally use, or you should know: before suit, after suit, before test, after test, before class, after class, before method, after method. And then where is the method actually? This is the method. Okay. Now let us understand the hierarchy of this execution. Okay. So since the XML file has suit as the parent hierarchy, so generally first what will execute is suit will be executed. Once the suit is executed, it will enter into the test. Each test will be executed. Inside the test, it will execute the class. Inside the class, you have @test method. It will execute. So suit, test, class, and methods. So now if we put these annotations in this hierarchical order or the execution order, it will be like this: let us assume that we are using all the 9 annotations. It is not mandatory to use all the 9. Based on the need, we will use them. But let us assume that for now we are using all the 9 annotations. So let me write this: before suit, because before executing this suit, I have some condition. I have to do some setup. Okay. So that setup will be done in before suit. After this suit, it will go into before test. Then the execution will be before test. Okay. And then it will be before class. And then it will be before method. And then it will be having the test case. After this, you will have after method. So my method is completed, right? So that is why I'll execute after method. Now I do not have any other method. So I have precondition completed, test case completed, and post test is completed. Now my class is completed, right? There is nothing in my class to run. So I have to execute after class. After class. Okay. I have dealt with my class. I entered into the class. I executed precondition method, test case, and post condition method. And then I also completed my class. So since I completed my class, I am executing after class annotation. Okay. Now we have completed the class. Now we have test case or test tag in the XML. So the test is also completed. That means you'll have @after test, and then @after suit. So this will be the execution order of test engine. You should remember this. This will be execution order of test engine. Okay. Before suit, before test, before class, before method, test, after method, after class, after test, and after suit. We opened it first, we closed it last. We opened before test second, and we closed after test last second. Right? So this is the order. However we open, you will close them in reversal order. Okay. So how do I know this, or how do I remember this? Let me go to the other window. I remember it based on this. See, there is a suit. Inside a suit, I have multiple tests, right? When I have before test, that means when my script enters before entering into this test tag, it will execute the before test, and then it will enter into the test. Okay. Then here I have classes. Before entering into each of the class, my before class method will execute. Inside the class, I have test case methods. So that method, before executing each method, my before method will be executed, and the test case method will be executed, and after it my test case method will after method will be executed. Then now I'll close my classes, I'll close my test. All right, so after classes, after test. Understood? And then here I have other test. Again, since I'm starting a new test tag, so my before test will be executed, and then my before class will be executed, class will be executed after class, and then before class, class after class, and then after test. So now I do not have any tests, so my after suit will be executed. Understood? So based on this TestNG hierarchy, we have the execution order of the annotations. Okay, is that clear? You understood the hierarchy of the annotations, hierarchy of the execution. Tomorrow I'll show you the sample execution of these annotations. Okay. Any questions in today's session, exception handling and TestNG introduction? No? Okay. Sharab said no. What about Bobby and Yanji? Any questions? Yanji, no. Okay. Bobby?
No.
Okay, fine. So this is the introduction of TestNG. So we are going to see a series of classes on TestNG. These are all the topics that we are going to cover on TestNG. So we are going to learn annotations. We have done half of it. We have to see the execution part, that's all. And then we'll see batch execution. How do we perform batch execution? And then TestNG groups, then assertions, parameters. How do we pass parameters to TestNG? And then we have data provider. While learning this data provider, we'll jump onto some other concept called working or file operations. Then how do we deal with the Excel sheets, or how do we deal with the properties file, such kind of things. So we are going to deal with those also in this data provider. And then we'll see introduction to listeners, and then we'll use extend reports here itself. Okay, we'll see the extend reports. That's all. Dependency injection will be covered as part of these sessions only. So these are all the sessions related to TestNG that we are going to learn now. Okay. So please try to attend regularly. Let us try to complete this as soon as possible. Okay. And do not hesitate if you have any questions, or if you don't understand something, or if you want me to repeat something, I'm happy to repeat, or I'm happy to explain you again. All I want is you to understand and practice it. That's all. All right. Chalo then. Have a great sleep. Bye-bye.
Thank you.